Hello, my name is Kiriath, and today we are going to have a little chat about this, because this is this month's White Dwarf. I got it about 40 minutes ago, and I was doing some reading, as you do, as I am wanting to do with a magazine. I mean, you can't do anything else with them, apart from burn them for heat, but why would you do that? So, there's an interesting thing in the back of this little section about the Necrons. So there's a bit about the last of the Silent Kings, a nice bit of lore, nice bit of backstory, just in case you weren't familiar with who the Necrons are, which of course you probably are. And of course the Silent King is mentioned quite a lot, in the name of the article kind of suggests it would be. And there is a massively contradictory thing in here, which is really interesting to me, because I'm kind of curious as to where this is going to go in future, to be totally honest. So, it talks about the fact that the Silent King went off for a bit of a jaunt, went somewhere else. And it says specifically that millions of years passed. In the cold and tomb-dark void, Zarek encountered the Tyranids and saw the potential of their hunger. Zarek had harboured a hope that the Necrons could return to bodies of flesh and blood, but if the Tyranids consume the galaxy's biomass, that apotheosis may never happen. His duty was clear. Zarek had no interest in preserving other civilizations, their armies and cultures he would happily see swept aside, but he would protect their biological integrity and do everything he could to ensure the Necrons harvested it for their own ascension. So, in that section, it's saying pretty clearly, the Silent King did not want the Tyranids to eat absolutely everything. That would be bad. If they eat everything, the Necrons can't be biological, mortal creatures ever again, which is not what he wants. So he came back, found the Tyranid threat was all over the place, lots of instability, a bunch of alien races all over the Necrons' worlds, you know the drill. And decided to go a bit sneaky about dealing with this issue, labyrinthine plans, all of that stuff. So, all of that is fine and good and dandy, and interesting, but nothing that we didn't already know before. The interesting bit is the last page of this particular article, just there. Because this suggests something almost completely different to that, which opens up a bunch of fun possibilities that could turn into something, and also could be nothing, but I would hope it isn't. So this is an exchange between Lord Inquisitor Draxus and Xenos contact Upsilon, who is Aeldari. And Upsilon tells a little story, a little bedtime tale, if you will. And I'll put it on the screen so you can read it yourself. And this to me just outright suggests that Zarek didn't encounter the Tyranids, he made them. To be totally honest, that's how it seems. Anyway, that's the way it reads to me, but I could be totally wrong, in which case there's two massively conflicting points of lore in here, which is interesting in and of itself. So, there's just a question as to, what have you got for me, what information do you have? And Upsilon had a dream. A story, a dream about a Lord of the Soulless Ones, let us say the Lord. Now, unless there is another The Lord of the Soulless Ones outside of the Silent King, it's safe to assume that that's what they're talking about. Although, you never know. But still, that seems pretty clear-cut. The Lord of the Soulless Ones. So, there was once a lord harbouring such lust for power that evil itself coalesced around him into fell beings that were mirror shades of his ambition. His timeless hate was driven into everything he encountered, even his own people. Yet it was in life's light that his enmity truly blossomed. Not content with driving it from his own kingdom, he sought to excise life from the wider world. In secret, he moved beyond the horizons of the world for an age, and there he bred horrors of infinite hunger. Finally pleased with their form, he showed them the shining light of the world and unleashed them upon it, where they moved from kingdom to kingdom, devouring everything. Bereft of life, his own kingdom is safe, and he laughs while all others weep in grief. Now, that is very interesting in the context of what we read just before, because that tells a totally different story. That tells the story of the Lord of the Soulless Ones, or the Necrons, as going beyond the world for an age, and instead of finding horrors of endless hunger, which is what the Tyranids are, making them instead, creating them himself. And there's also a nice reference there to how they came to be in the galaxy. So we know that the Pharos Beacon is responsible for summoning the Tyranids to some extent. They kind of focused in on the psychic light or fancy, magical, whatever you want to call it. It drew them in beyond, from beyond the fringes of the galaxy into this galaxy, and immediately they started eating absolutely everything there was. And even that itself takes on a different flavour when read in this way. Finally he showed them the shining light of the world and unleashed them upon it. Again, that's a different interpretation of that. The kind of official story is he went out, he discovered them, and then when he came back they were all over the place. In this, the story is he left, he created the Tyranids, and I would interpret the showing them the shining light of the world as knowing that the beacon had been activated, being able to see that that beacon had been activated, and essentially pointing them in that direction and going, that's where you go to feed. That's a totally different interpretation, a totally different approach to that same story. And it fits a lot of the stuff that actually works for Tyranids anyway. I mean, as I say, we know what the Pharaoh's Beacon did, it brought them in. But the reference to moving from kingdom to kingdom, devouring everything, obviously it's a metaphor that has been scaled down to be more of a planetary thing as opposed to anything else. But moving from kingdom to kingdom, devouring everything, but him laughing because they're essentially of no consequence. Tyranids love biomass. They need biomass to exist. They can't exist without it, and so they move from place to place, eating everything, consuming it, and then moving on. Necrons don't have to deal with that because Necrons have no biomass. They're essentially irrelevant to Tyranids as a whole because what are you going to eat out of a Necron? You're not going to get much sustenance out of a metal skeleton. And so they're effectively not really all that fussed about Tyranids as a whole. In terms of the conflict between the two, I mean, do they really matter? The Necrons don't matter to the Tyranids. The Tyranids do matter to the Necrons in the fact that they're consuming all the biomass that the Necrons might need to become, actual living creatures once more. But still, that paints a very different picture, which leads me to wonder which one is actually correct. That's the thing that I'm finding interesting, because the start of this, well, not the start of it, but not like a page before, it's pretty clearly stated, the sequence of events, that he left. He encountered the Tyranids, saw the potential of their hunger, and then he came back. And the Tyranids were all over the shop. But that's not what the Aeldari is saying. And what interests me is which one is actually true. Whether it's a case of the official story being the right one, or whether there is something a lot more sinister to it. Whether it is just essentially a power game. Whether the rise back from being what the Necron currently are to what they used to be is essentially just a front for the Silent King consolidating power amongst a whole array of different dynasties that have taken over since they left. And actually, the Tyranids were released on purpose. They were engineered by him. They were actually sent in order to essentially just sterilise this galaxy and make it a home for the Necrons alone. It's interesting because it's like a total contradiction between the two things. I don't think it's referring to another race necessarily. I did think about that initially. Like, are we going to see like a secondary, endlessly hungering swarm of nightmarish creatures? But we've already got one. I mean, yeah, they could do with a bit more support and a bit more love, but we have the Tyranids. We've got them. Having a second race that functionally was the same is not particularly exciting. It's not particularly interesting. So that seems unlikely. The other thing is maybe the Satan themselves. I mean, they are supposed to be endless things of endless hunger, so maybe. But then it still doesn't, unless he bred captive Satan together, which, I don't know, is that a thing that can be done? That's another alternative, I guess. But yeah, it just interested me. Two completely contradictory, conflicting statements, two stories telling the same giving the same overall gist of something, but from completely different angles. I mean, if the kind of official story is correct, then okay. But if the Aeldari one is correct, then rather than the Silent King encountering the Tyranids and deciding, well, okay, I need to come back and do something about this, when he finds that the Tyranids are all over the galaxy consuming everything, instead it paints a very different picture of him going away, developing them, setting them loose on the galaxy when the Pharaoh's Beacon was lit, safe in the knowledge that they may well consume everything, but not caring. And in fact, aiming for that, because his people specifically would be safe. It'd be pretty fucking cold if that's actually what it was. But yeah, I just found that very interesting. Let me know what your theories and ideas and stuff are for that in the comments. Do you reckon it is just like a folklore thing for the Eldar? Do you think they're trying to throw humanity off in some way? Do you think actually it is that dark that yes, the Silent King is responsible for unleashing the Tyranids on the galaxy? Or do you think it might be somewhere in between where it might not be quite as clear cut as either of those stories properly makes out? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Feel free to click all the things, you know how it works, various links, and the affiliate link in the description for Element Games. Buy stuff for cheaper, some of it goes to charity, I get something if you send me that way, and yeah, it's a nice way to support the channel if you would like to. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you for the next one.